Hi, I'm Mike Henry, and this is my Procreate 4.3 demo for the piece I call We Are Not Your Kind. So, those of you who are Slipknot fans instantly know who this is. Those of you who are not, this is Corey Taylor, the lead singer of Slipknot. Their new record actually came out today, which is the whole reason why I'm trying to get this recorded and out the door. It just seems cool on the day the record comes out to also get this out. I did this a little bit ago. I drew a picture of Corey a while back. Unfortunately, it was right before they debuted their new masks and looks and everything, so I wanted to do a new one that was updated. My son is a big Slipknot fan as well. We just got back a month ago. We saw them in France, and he wanted to see Corey with the new stuff on. So that's the whole reason why I did this. Let's talk about what's actually happening here in the illustration. You see me start in the beginning with a rough sketch, and then I want to start getting some of that anatomy a little bit more correct. So I do it more as a full body or a half body with the intention to crop it. You've seen me use that technique in the past, and that's a really good way to make sure that all of my anatomy is correct, my composition is correct. Maybe I can play with the composition a little bit more, which is all just really nice to haves kind of thing. Also, I have not drawn this character, so to speak, before. I have not drawn Corey with this new costume, so I had to kind of explore it a little bit. I really did not like where I was going with this illustration when I started it. It's one of the main reasons why I don't like drawing characters, people from bands that I like and stuff. One of my favorite bands of all time, MU330, I once did a sketch of them in a sketchbook, and in the middle of it I hated it so much that I was I'm never doing this again. So the fact that I'm even doing a second version of this guy is kind of surprising. But anyways, I don't like usually doing caricatures or even likenesses, but since there's the mask and all that stuff, it's kind of like drawing a superhero or something, so it made it a lot easier for me to get excited about doing it. So now at this stage, you can see I've placed a crop on everything. I've basically just created a box that's the same dimensions as the canvas, put it on, and now I'm starting to doodle around and say, okay, well, how can I play with this to actually make it exciting and make it something I'll really want to work on? So now I've blown it up to the size of the actual canvas. I'm starting to work on it, and I don't really like a lot of this pose. Corey in some of the marketing material poses similarly to that, but it's better, and I wasn't pulling it off, and it was starting to frustrate me. So I decided to jump away from it and actually do, what if I did a stage shot with the crowd, and he's commanding the crowd or something. Honestly, this looks a little bit more like Jim Root than it does Corey, and I just wasn't liking it because it didn't really have the intensity. It might have a cool crowd shot, but it didn't have what I needed, basically. So here I'm making an adjustment. I'm moving Corey to the left so that we're actually getting more of his body. Him kind of going more to the left of the screen gives it some intensity too, by shoving him over to the left, and it's focused on him, but it's not as focused on him, and we're getting to see a little bit more of his body language, and he's got more of an intense grip hand gesture instead of the fists, instead of the sort of grabbing his cowl that he does in some of the marketing material, and I was starting to kind of like this a little bit more. This is the point where I realized I would actually continue with it, and my son walked by and really liked it, and I was like, okay, he likes it, I'm starting to like it, let's just keep working with it and see where it goes. You always know if I actually think it's going to go somewhere if I make it past the flatting stage, because the flatting stage is when I get the most bored, and if I get bored during the flatting stage, then I just don't finish. So you can see here now the flatting has begun. One thing that I want to stress is that I was running the iOS beta when I worked on this, and Procreate and the iOS beta weren't really getting along too well, so some of this video, some of the time-lapse does get cut out. But we're going to actually go through the Procreate file, so don't worry about understanding how this thing is built. You can see right there, it just took a huge jump forward. All the shadowing just basically got instantaneously done. But now we're working on the highlights, and now I jump forward again. We've got the rim light, we've got the motion blurs that are sort of coming in and drawing attention to Corey's face, and as well as a couple of color adjustments happening there. And then we're going to have at the end of this phase, there's going to suddenly be some chromatic aberration and some texture. And you're going to see me working on his mouth again. One of the things that I didn't really like about the mouth was the size of the teeth, but I'm going to go into that more in detail in a minute. All you need to know is that at this point I'm finalizing some of the finer details, some of the rim light stuff from that red, and then eventually I will sort of copy all of this into a brand new document and start tweaking the teeth there, which is what you see right here. We've now jumped into a new document, and you see me resizing the teeth and then sort of cleaning up around them a little bit so that we can try and get the teeth a little bit more accurate to what Corey's actually look like. By the way, if you're wondering, the new record is quite good, like extremely good, so check it out. So right here we're basically just watching me noodle around with the teeth. You'll see in a minute I create a bunch of new layers, and I'm sort of color picking and painting and adjusting and color picking and painting and just trying to clean up the areas around the mouth so that these new teeth that I've resized fit well in with the rest of the painting work that I've already done. This is actually the way a lot of people just flat out work. I basically only work this way when I'm doing like a patch or when I'm trying to adjust something. That's the only time you'll see me really work this way. And so then here we're going to see me adjusting the shadow at the top, making sure that that shadow that's being cast from his mask and upper lip is the same as the one that I painted before, and really just kind of going through it and trying to be as meticulous as possible about, well, I changed that and I did that and I need to make sure it looks the same. All done still with the turpentine brush. Now I'm just adding some extra little particulate spit to really emphasize the intensity of that spit, and that's it. That's the final piece right there. And I'm super happy with the way it came out. However, I'm not super happy with the fact that I lost some of that footage. So let's dive into the file and actually talk about what's going on here. Okay, so since we're having trouble with all of the capturing, I thought it'd be nice to just go into the files and sort of talk through them so that you could see exactly what is actually there structurally. You're not going to be able to see me create it in real time, but I can go through all the layers. So you can see here's the WANYK, We Are Not Your Kind folder. This is how I protect myself for when I have to merge layers. You can see here, this is sort of as far as the piece got before I had to start merging things. Let's go into the canvas information. So you can see here the pixel dimensions and the physical dimensions. You can see also that I have 46 layers used out of the 58. Now, I sometimes push it all the way up until it starts telling me stop adding more layers, but occasionally, you know, you just run into a situation where I don't want to have to start worrying about that, so I create a new document, and then that way when I'm in the middle of things I know I can start merging because I've got things already saved in the previous file. So that's why you see so many versions of this here in this folder. Now let's go to where I believe is the best version to really be talking about the major stages, which is the WNYK 3 that we have right here. Okay, there we go. So it's fully loaded. You can see it's got the blur effects, the sort of streaking going on, and most of it is painted where it needs to be, minus the mouth adjustments. So let's look at the layers so that we can actually talk about just the specifics of this, and you can see how things were built. I'm going to quickly take all of this, and group it, because that'll be easier. Turn it off. And then I'm going to take this, and this, and group it and turn it off. So now what you see here is the sort of raw painting before all of the, for lack of a better term, post-processing. This is after all the post-processing has been, or before it's all been done. So here we've also got the sketch on top. You can see how that sort of relates there. Okay, and let's turn that off. Okay, so what do we have as far as these layers are concerned? Let's turn off all the dimension layers. And these are our flats for the piece. Let's go through the flats actually, because I think the thing that's kind of interesting about the way this is constructed is the flats themselves, and the fact that he has a face that then has paint on it and then has a mask over the top of that. So we have all these turned off. Let's go to, see if I just turn on and off like the stubble, which you can see right there on his face, and then we've got the skull on his hand, on his glove. So turn off the stubble and that, and then the last thing here we have is like the gloves themselves. So that's sort of our first major flat that we have there. Then we've got the hair that's in the front. We've got that sprig of hair that is behind that other hair, but it's in front of that sort of background silhouetted hair that we've got, that's used more as a backdrop for his face than it is for actual hair dimension. And then we have the mask. So this is all of the mask layers. So if we turn them off one by one, you'll see there's kind of a shadow layer turned off, and then here's sort of like another shadow layer. Then we've got the main chunk of the mask right there, and then we've got this sort of supporting mask. Okay, so we turn all that off, and then what we have here is a pretty hilarious moment with these irises. But we are now down to, let's see, let's get back down here. We're down to the eyes, so we turn off the eyelashes. Let's actually not worry about turning off all of the eye layers. Let me turn the eyelashes back on and actually get down to the face paint. So here's the face paint layer. So we turn that off. You can see the face actually has absolutely no dimension. I actually considered doing things like darkening around the eyes and whether or not I would want to actually do the sort of blush around the nose, and that could be good because then if the paint gets exposed there, or if the skin gets exposed through the paint there, you would see that. But to be honest, it wasn't going to come through, and if it did come through, it had the potential to kind of muddy up the clarity of the image. The reality of Corey's mask on this new record is it is a lot of noise despite its how simple it is, and when you're looking at a real person running around with that on, your brain can kind of sort out a good amount of that information. But I feel like when we've got a little bit of stylization going on and it's painterly and we're trying to represent this plastic mask over the face paint, which is on skin, which is over a dimension, you know, like an actual topology, I think that all of that is a lot to try and sort out. So the way that I sorted that out, oh, and of course there's other layers too. I guess I should quickly highlight the way the rest of these layers are, and then we'll get back to that mask part because I think that's the most interesting aspect of all of this. We've got this drop shadow right there, separating the head and the hair. We have that back hair, that's what that is right there. We have the S, the Slipknot S there. And here you can barely see it turning on and off is his like sort of cowl, the like sort of big neck piece that's part of the zip up that's underneath, I think it's a zip up at least, that's underneath his coat. And then you've got the coat as the main mass back there. We have some background stuff, but I mean really this background stuff is pretty inconsequential. Now, let's get back to here. We've got the face paint. So the face paint for this is mostly based off of some reference, but then just tweaked a little bit. Let's turn it on. And something that you'll see here that I actually didn't take the time to do when I did, which I kind of regret now, but when I did the white version, the Birth of the Cool version, is I didn't blur this out exactly the same way. But what you can see I did here is I selected the mask. That's what we've got going on here. I selected the mask, and then where the mask was is where I blurred the paint after producing it like all across the face. The paint was actually smeared in simply by using the turpentine brush and treating it like it was face paint, and so it was getting smeared kind of badly, and I would use the I would paint it and then I would use the smear to get a little bit smearier and all that kind of stuff, and that's how we built the actual paint. which again you can see right there. It's basically just trapped by the skin layer. Although, one thing that I do want to point out is it goes... What just happened? Oh, I switched it to multiply. It goes a little bit beyond the skin because it's going to fill up where the mask is. So you can see that a little bit right there. So we've got that. And then we go back to the mask. What are the components of the mask? Well, I've got the main fill-in, which is really kind of funny when you look at that little thumbnail because you realize just how much this mask looks like his All Hope Is Gone mask. But anyways, you can see that this is a low opacity. It is, let's get up to it, 16%. Because what I'm trying to do now at this point is I'm trying to keep the vibe of the turpentine brush, but I have to start representing like a clear latex, like a translucent latex, and that's going to be kind of a pain in the ass, at least in the fact that I try not to belabor my pieces and work on them for too long. So it's like, okay, what tricks can I start using? So I started using some other tricks other than just like raw turpentine brush. But anyways, you can see here, so if I go full blast, that's what that looks like there as far as full opacity. Then we go to the next layer up. Now let's turn off the supporting layer. And what you see here is a mask that is essentially solid, but then I'm using a mask, as in a layer mask, to remove some of that. And this is where we're still getting a lot of that turpentine action in, so that it doesn't feel like it's a little too latexy. So, or excuse me, I shouldn't say too latexy, like too slick. I don't want the piece to feel slick. So that's why we've got that going on there. So what do we have to comprise this mask so far? Well, we have a supportive layer that is essentially just the solid for that entire shape with a lowered opacity. Then on top of that, we have another solid, but now its translucency is being controlled. So I'm choosing actually where that mask would be thinnest and trying to get that translucency out of it. Then the next step up, we've got this just sort of darkening. It's like it literally just selecting the opposite and filling it black, blurring it, and then clearing it again from everywhere but the mask. So we're creating a black haloing effect that's coming into the mask. And then it was duplicated. Is that all it is? Duplicated? Let's see. Yep. And so that's just duplicated. Although this is like clearly messier. It's only been a few weeks since I did this, but I'm already forgetting some of my techniques. So you can see here, let's turn off a bunch of this stuff so you can see it. Yeah. So, oh, that's what I did. Now I remember what I did. I took the selection from the softer one, and then I used the turpentine brush and went around it. And that way it was still bound by that fuzziness, but it was the turpentine brush is what was creating a texture there. That's exactly what that is. And then the two are on at the same time to reinforce one another. Okay, so let's turn everything back on. So now you can see, let me zoom in, you got the stubble, you got the teeth and the tongue and the eyes looking up. We've got this gradient on the eyeball, and that's it. The real action comes in on the next folder, right? So this is everything else now turned back on. So let's turn this all off one by one. One by one, one by one by one. Cool. And now we'll start turning them back on and we'll talk about them. Okay, so here we first turn on our occlusion layer, ambient occlusion layer. So if we make this normal for a minute, it's a little bit easier to see like where all the play is. You can see, like in other videos that I've done, I'm trying to keep this soft. I'm trying to keep it about the darkest parts. I'm trying to use it to define some of that surface. So you see it around the eyes right here. And that's where we're trying to, it's a really tricky mask to try and represent because it's clear, but there is some like actual definition in there. So we've got this like raised part around the eyes and around the mouth. And so we try to emphasize that with the shadow since we're in there. Now if I take that layer, you can see its color now. its true color, and then switch it back to multiply. This is what we get. So it's good in the sense that good from a viewing point of view, because you can see some definition coming in, and there's some niceness in seeing that definition, but it's not truly showing us a fully lit thing. So the next layer is our direct light layer. So here now we're taking the same color and we're blocking in a big ass chunk of shadow. So this is what it looks like when it's turned on. The one thing that's interesting is when you're dealing with these darker values like the coat, you're not as specific because it's even kind of hard to see anyhow. And when you turn these on, you see it's a little bit messier than it should be. But then when you get into some of the lighter areas, it's a little tighter because it's more clear what all that definition is. Okay, so let's switch it back to multiply. Next layer up, that hot rim on the lighting. And then this is the nostrils. I think almost always the nostrils need to get punched up. Sometimes like the ear holes, it sort of depends on things. And then we use light blue for the lighting. Now this pass, you can see here, this is like a pretty distinct pass. We're talking about representing the somewhat shininess of his gloves, trying to find that hard edge of the head and some of these hard edges on these details here, as well as the eyeball. And then we're trying to put some stylistic aspects in with the hair shine. Next layer up is, this is one of those moments where I go, what layer did I turn in? Oh, okay, right, it's the hotness in the gloves. So all it is trying to make sure those are getting just a little bit more punched up. Okay, now we pull out and let's look at the red rim light. I was trying to replicate some of the recent marketing material from the new record, like the photo shoot they did for Metal Hammer UK and stuff. So that's where this red lighting is coming from. And then there's just a little bit more to give that light some dimension. So that's just straightforward painting. There's not much more to be said about that part. And then we go up. Boom. So this is now like the bounce pass. So if we go in here, there's bounce light on the red, excuse me, of course there's bounce light on the red. There's bounce light on the hair, and then there's bounce light from the hair onto the mask. Some bounce light happening here up under the hair. If I toggle it on and off again, you'll see other spots, no doubt, where, oh, wrong layer, there we go. You'll see other stuff like even on the eye here, getting some reflection action there. And then next up, we've got the spit. This is the start of the spit. You can see the spit is, as a base, it's actually very similar to the mask. It's just shapes that have a lowered opacity that start as white. And then I didn't actually do, like, you'll see me in a lot of pieces, I'll do like the same thing I did with the mask, where I select it and then I select the inverse and then I fill on a new layer and then I blur that and then I select the inverse again and clear it, and that makes it so that those blurred soft edges that encroached on the shape are there, and they act almost as like a rim light, like an equal rim light around the entire thing, or a halo effect. Here, because I wanted to keep the turpentine brush feel, it's just hand drawn in, like it's just, yeah, okay, there, let's put a white circle around that and a white outline around that, and then it's done. We have just a little hotness around the glint in the eye. That's what this blue is. And then I'm going to pull out because there's like sort of a fill, a brightening fill here, right there, that's used to just emphasize that light is on that side, and it's sort of a bit of a flood, that's all. Okay, now last but not least, we get into sort of the post-processing stage, which takes it to this. How do we get to that? Well, let's turn them all off and actually see, because I believe I have some extra layers in here, but let's look. Okay, so this layer has my signature in it. That can't be the only thing. All right, because the signature is also on that layer. Then the next one up is a color, it's a temperature adjustment. It's really subtle, but watch, and there, got a little cooler in the shadows. Now this layer is the same layer again. You can see from the thumbnails that they're all entire images. Same layer again, and I'm using the turpentine brush smudge to smudge towards his mouth, towards his face, to try and bring that intensity into his face. And then we have this, which is a blur around the edges, and you can see that there as I toggle it on and off. So what I've done here is I've duplicated the image, blurred it, and I'm using a mask to remove all of the blur from the focal point, which is his face. And then we've got one more up there, which is just adding in a couple of more blurs and such. Smears, actually. Now, what's in this last secret little folder? Actually some interesting like cover-ups. Let's turn these all off real quick. So you can see there's a lot of smearing going on in order to bring that intensity to the middle, but then I didn't really like it all. So here, it's me duplicating the hair and actually color shifting it a little bit, and parts of the face as well, and I'm using all of that to take some of that smearing out of it, just a little bit. Next is some extra nose definition. I thought that the nose was feeling a little too bright for its location in the piece, even if that is sort of like correct quote-unquote lighting. So here we've got this, giving some extra dimension around the nose and emphasizing the fact that the nose is encased within that mask. And then this, which is just darkening the whole nose, just making sure that it's darker. Then we turn the signature on again, and that is almost the finished piece. Now let's jump into the other file and actually see what it looks like when we bring this home. And now this is the absolute final stage. This seems like a lot of work. It actually was all in all pretty swift, but due to the nature of Procreate and sort of how we have to do certain things, it sort of seems a little bit more complicated maybe on this particular piece. But anyways, what you need to know here is you can see this image is actually different than where we were at with the previous file. Admittedly, I took this into Photoshop. What I did in Photoshop, I threw the texture on it, which you can see right here. I didn't have to go into Photoshop to throw that texture on it. I just happened to be in Photoshop and I did it. But what was more important was doing the channel shifting and the chromatic aberration, which you can see right there. That is super easy to do in Photoshop and virtually impossible. I don't know how to do it in Procreate. I recently did when I did the white version, the Birth of the Cruel version, I used an app from the App Store that actually sucked, but it was kind of good that it sucked because it added a lot of damage to the image, which was good. But that's how I did it there, and it wasn't very good. So where I'm at with this one was I took the image that you last saw, put it into Photoshop, did the chromatic aberration. While I was in there, I was like, you know what, let's just throw a texture on it while I'm here, and then that'll be the final version of it, and then I saved it. And then like a day went by and something started to bother me, and what that was the size of his teeth. I actually think, as far as my style goes, I usually draw characters with fairly large teeth, but Corey doesn't really have large teeth, so I was like, okay, I need to fix this. It's starting to drive me nuts. So I very crudely went in and tried to start repainting it so I could show it to my wife. So when we look over here, we've got a bunch of layers here, so I'm going to sort of go through them in the way that they were created. I'm going to turn them on first. So here's one. Actually, let's zoom in on just the mouth. There we go. That's better. So there's that. You can see bunk, 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 bunk. And then this one, bunk. And then this one, bunk. That just is the cover up. You can see right there, it's covering up a lot of that shit. Then we've got this one, so that's the lower teeth. Then we've got this one that is that, and then that, and that, to try and start piecing it all together, and then some cover up on top. And then what I did was I showed it to my wife, and you can see these are in two different folders specifically so that I could be like, I was like, bottom teeth and top teeth, or maybe just bottom teeth, or maybe the bottom teeth are fine, it's the top teeth that are a problem. And I was just sort of doing that, and she actually gave me feedback that was to only do the bottoms, I think it was, but it was still kind of bothering me that the tops, it would have been like that, and I just think it would have been a little too off, so I went ahead and did both. So that was my quick previs just to be like, okay, should I fix the teeth? And I think that even just doing that right here, you can see that there was an improvement as far as the accuracy goes of the person that I'm trying to represent. Now, here are the layers where I actually went in and did the adjustments, and they're done linearly, and I just sort of select and paint and select and paint, and oh, I'm going to do something that's a little extreme, so a new layer, that type of a thing. So the first thing is, actually the first thing was probably admittedly this layer. Yeah, you can see that change right there. And then this layer to sort of fill in those problems. And then moving on to this, you can see, I'll try to toggle back and forth. I hope this is clear, but let's just zoom in on the top so that you can see there's the difference between those two. And again, these are all just on these layers as is, like they aren't very pretty. Let's turn all this off. You know, just like this. It's not like my usual method where things are a little bit more planned out. This is just pretty much like crude, select paint, select paint. Obviously there are people that work that way, but for me, since it's not really flexible, I don't really do that. Okay, so as I'm turning these on, you're seeing some slight adjustments, 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 more spit, adjustments. That's a mouth adjustment right there, you can see. And that is all the layers and the finished process. So hopefully, even though the video got all messed up, this will help you see some of what I did and how it was all constructed, and it'll help with your understanding of the parts that were missing from the video. So now let's dive into the Birth of the Cruel version of his suit, because the whole band debuted these like white outfits. Here I'm first starting by changing that undershirt type thing he's got on, that under hoodie cowl thingy. It has a pattern on it, but I didn't feel like it was necessary to replicate it in the black one because everything was so dark anyways. But in the new white version, it's like black with these big white stripe type things. And so I wanted to make sure I got that right. Also, there doesn't appear to be, it was hard to find photo, but there doesn't appear to be the Slipknot S on his arm. And in the actual music video, he had this very distinct paint where it was all pink on one side, black on the other, with like a little bit of white at the top. And so I wanted to replicate that. Here I'm turning now the mask back on, and I'm sort of shoving it around. I did this really quick, so I actually regret that I didn't do some of the wiping away of the paint like under his eye and stuff like I did in the other one. But once I got that mask done, that paint done, and I got some of the color shifting of the coat and everything done, like that was basically it. And now I'm at the stage where I'm putting in those streaks, but I also have to do some color adjustments because of the hair. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm getting those adjustments right. And what we've jumped to now is I took that entire image and I pulled it over into the teeth file, and it turned out it actually worked out quite well. There was nothing about my teeth adjustments that really impacted the fact that I had the white changes to the outfit. Then here I throw on some textures and some subtle color adjustments, and then I threw it into a really shitty VHS app to make it look like it was kind of VHS-y, but then it produced a really, really low-res image, which actually was kind of awesome. And then I brought it back into the file and just did some of these like streaky blurs across it by creating boxes and then doing motion blurs in the direction of the boxes. And so I've duplicated the video here a couple times just so that you can see what that process looks like over and over again. And of course, the reason I did it all this way is because the Birth of the Cruel video is like a really low-res, really lo-fi VHS recording, so I wanted to replicate that. So this here is the final version of that, and let's jump back to the original since it is higher fidelity and just kind of nicer to look at, but a little less, you know, trying to achieve that atmosphere. And that's it for this video. So it's an exciting day for Slipknot fans, and it was really fun for me to do this piece. It was something that kind of came together, and I'm really happy that it did. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this, please consider liking and subscribing, maybe leave a comment, maybe click the bell, just like click things. Thanks. Bye. And if you're looking for me on the internet, these are the places where you can find me.